I'm Ian Masters, and this is Background Briefing, available 24/7 at backgroundbriefing.org. And joining us now is Katrina Mulligan, the Managing Director for National Security and International Policy at the Center for American Progress. She previously served as an Attorney Advisor and Director for Preparedness and Response in the National Security Division at the United States Department of Justice, where she also represented the department on a wide range of National Security Council policy committees. Prior to joining the DOJ, she served on the National Security Council staff and also served in several roles within the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, including as Associate Director for Strategic Communications Initiatives. Welcome to Background Briefing, Katrina Mulligan.
Very glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for joining us. And what do you make of the phone call, I guess, that the heads of the Senate and House Intelligence Committees got on Friday from the Director of National Intelligence, John Ratcliffe, informing them that they would no longer be getting in-person briefings about election security and would have to rely on written updates. And in making this change, 10 weeks before the election, John Ratcliffe said that the move is an attempt to ensure clarity and consistency. But a lot of people aren't buying that. Do you buy it?
Look, anytime the intelligence community, particularly when led by a relatively new and fairly partisan director, decides that it's going to withhold information from Congress, I think the American public should be concerned. That's especially so when what we're talking about is something so foundational to our democracy. Foreign efforts to interfere, which we know they did in 2016, and the intelligence community has already indicated is ongoing. And so it's really difficult to square the severity of what is happening in our democratic process with this decision to just, hey, they can just only see what we've written and published, and that's enough. I disagree, and I really think there are kind of two problems with what's going on. One is that DNI Ratcliffe, who is brand new to his job and is widely understood to be the least qualified DNI ever to be confirmed, is making these decisions. And from what I hear from my colleagues in the intelligence community, this decision was made rather hastily and without the kind of careful deliberation that you would expect on a matter this serious. Now, he may not understand the full scope of his job, but pursuant to the 1991 Intelligence Authorization Act, the intelligence community is required to keep congressional intelligence committees fully and currently informed of intelligence activities of the United States. And that's a broad requirement that almost certainly includes intelligence related to foreign interference in our democracy. So when Ratcliffe says that he's going to provide written intelligence products, what I think we should all understand is that is a poor substitute for an in-person briefing with experts where you have the opportunity to question and probe the facts and understand the confidence levels of the assessments. There's just no substitute for a written briefing. Second issue that I see is that the net effect of what the Trump administration is doing to politicize intelligence and break from all the norms regarding intelligence hearings is that they are essentially undermining public confidence in the intelligence agencies. And in a critical election year, as foreign actors are seeking to interfere in our democracy, the Trump administration is refusing to hold the annual threat assessment hearing, depriving the public of information about the threats facing the nation. And now the DNI is refusing to provide threat information briefings to Congress. And so while I can sort of understand why the Trump administration would want to restrict information about Russian efforts to interfere on his behalf, Congress really shouldn't allow it.
Well, Senator Angus King, who's an independent, he says it's an outrage. It smacks of a cover-up of information about foreign interference in our elections. If there is foreign interference in our elections, we should know about it before the election. The Intelligence Committee is not a history organization. It's a current events organization. I think he put it pretty well, didn't he?
Absolutely. I mean, it simply cannot be that for the final 10 weeks of this election, the only people with a full and current picture of what Russia is doing to interfere in our election are President Trump and his allies. I mean, that's not the way that elections should be run. Congress and the public and his opponent have a right to know. And trying to restrict and limit the distribution of this type of information on matters that's important, it doesn't make sense, and it's inconsistent on its face with what they are saying that they're trying to do. And I really don't think Congress should accept it.
And again, I'm speaking with Katrina Mulligan, who's the Managing Director for National Security and International Policy at the Center for American Progress. She previously served as an attorney advisor and Director for Preparedness and Response at the National Security Division at the United States Department of Justice, where she represented the department on a wide range of National Security Council policy committees. And prior to joining the DOJ, she served on the National Security Council staff and also served in several roles within the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, including as Associate Director for Strategic Communications initiatives. So you mentioned earlier that obviously lawmakers on the Senate and House Intelligence Committee, and when you have an in-person briefing, you can question the briefer and ask for more details. And I mean, we've already gotten this recent report from the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, which they offered up rather reluctantly, and it suggested that the Russians were trying to discredit Joe Biden. It didn't actually say specifically that they were in favor of Donald Trump. It just said that they were trying to undermine Joe Biden, particularly, and they mentioned this seedy character in Ukraine who Giuliani and company have been working with. And then they went on to say that the Chinese in fact, they started out saying the Chinese and the Iranians are the top two players in terms of meddling, which is clearly not true. Russia's done it before. They've had their rehearsal. They know what they're doing. They're much more skilled. China, as far as we know, is not meddling in the election. But what they said about China was that they actually prefer Biden over Trump, and that they want consistency and stability in the relationship. I don't buy that. I mean, when you look at what's happened to the United States, the world's leading hegemon is now a basket case. Its economy's in free fall. It's locked down. It's for all of Trump's talk about a wall. We're all walled in. We can't even leave the country. The Canadians next door don't want us in. Our economy, as I mentioned, is falling through the roof. We've got 6 million infections, which public health officials say could be 10 times worse, really. So surely Trump is the gift that keeps on giving, not just to Putin, but to Xi Jinping. If he's our rival and an aspiring hegemon, surely he's sitting back and watching us flounder. And by the way, a lot of countries around the world, our friends and allies, are taking pity on us.
I mean, look, I think it is correct to say that there are certainly those in China who would be thrilled to see Trump's reelection and to see us continue in a downward spiral. Anything that harms the U.S. To some in the Chinese government would be advantageous from their side. But I think that comparing China and the way that they influence and seek to interfere with what Russia has done is a mistake, because there really is a tangible difference between, the subtle ways that the Chinese try to interfere in the U.S. political process, which is really around the margins, and the very direct and hostile way that Russians did interfere and are seeking to interfere again. And I think that the Trump administration is really trying to make an apples to oranges comparison here because they think it's politically advantageous to do so. If they can say that, well, look, China favors Biden and so Russia favors Trump, what's the big deal? It's a gaslighting effort when in reality there is a big deal going on, and it's not going on with what China's doing. What the big deal right now, as it pertains to our democracy and to our elections, is that Russia is actively seeking to interfere and to sow discord in the United States and to get people to take actions that they wouldn't otherwise take. And that is a huge problem. It's a problem that this president has refused to acknowledge or do anything serious about. And, I really think that the focus on other countries is misplaced.
Well, Senator Chuck Schumer said that Ratcliffe, the head of the DNI, Ratcliffe has made clear he is in the job to protect Trump from democracy, not democracy from Trump. So we shouldn't have any illusions, surely, about who he is. We've seen him as a kind of pro-Trump attack dog when he was a congressman. I don't know how he was ever confirmed. He has no background. He lied about his efforts as a U.S. attorney in terms of counterterrorism, which was a fiction. His deputy, Kash Patel, is a complete Trumpster and ideologue, a protege of Devin Nunes. Surely we shouldn't have any illusions. These people are put in there by Trump to do Trump's bidding. Isn't it that simple?
I mean, I'm honestly I'm dismayed by the willingness of this administration to put people into positions that are this important to our national security who have absolutely no experience and who are motivated by what benefits Trump, not what benefits the American people. And I mean, I think you said it exactly right. I think Ratcliffe and Kash Patel, to the same degree, are sent there to protect Trump from factual information and not to inform Trump or the rest of his administration about threats. And, that's really backwards. That's not what the job is supposed to be. And, I feel for my former colleagues in the Office of the Director of National Intelligence who are having to navigate, first it was Rick Grinnell, who also had no business being in that role. And now, Ratcliffe, who really, just lacks the gravitas of the kinds of people that came before him.
Well, it's pretty clear that you've seen how Trump treated the earlier heads of the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, particularly the Republican senator, a former Republican senator from Indiana, who was a fairly, moderate, centrist kind of Republican, not one of the new breed that we have now. He was treated very shabbily. Then his replacement, Admiral McGuire, was treated very shabbily. In fact, Sue Gordon was supposed to take over. She was given the back of Trump's hand. Isn't it clear what he's saying? The signals must be clear to everybody in the intelligence community. I don't want to hear the facts. I just want to hear good news and never mention Russia.
I mean, that certainly seems to be the case. And one of the sort of sad tales of the story of the Trump administration is that, no good men and women have survived first contact. I mean, he has a way of tainting the reputations of everybody who engages with him, no matter how noble their objectives are when they join him. And we've seen that time and time again, both inside the intelligence community and outside of it. When a new administration takes over, assuming that that's what happens in November, they're going to have a lot of work to do to restore faith and trust and integrity in these institutions. These institutions have been deeply hollowed out from the inside. A lot of career civil servants, myself included, have left the ranks of the civil service rather than continue to serve in ways that are inconsistent with our values. And, it's going to be very difficult to turn that aircraft carrier around and, restore a sense of mission and purpose that is very rooted in what's best for the American people and not what's best for the executive branch and the person at the top of it, because it has been a culture shift that's taken place over the last 4 years to the detriment of, a lot of the public servants that I know and worked with.
Well, just in closing, the New York Times is revealing an extraordinary piece of new information regarding when Comey was fired. There was kind of a panic at the top of the DOJ, and acting head of the DOJ, the deputy head of the DOJ, Rod Rosenstein, at the time, decided to put together a counterintelligence investigation into Trump because they had no way to explain why he just fired Comey. And but then he very quickly buried the report or stopped the activity, didn't tell the FBI, and then went ahead and told Mueller that he wasn't even to go near any kind of counterintelligence investigation of Trump, that his mandate was only to look for crimes. So it strikes me as a kind of similar to what Barr did in outmaneuvering to mischaracterize the Mueller report. But this sort of sabotage, if you will, was done much, much earlier. So what do you think was going on with Rod Rosenstein? Was he really, along with Barr, trying to bury this story? And we still haven't seen this counterintelligence report, not that it necessarily went very far, but clearly there have been previous counterintelligence files on Donald Trump, none of which have ever been made public. So I suspect that at the end of the day, that might be the smoking gun.
Yeah, I mean, for those of us who followed the Mueller investigation carefully, I think most of us always believed that the counterintelligence investigation was where the action was going to be. And it's important, I think, for your listeners to understand the difference. When we use these terms like the criminal investigation versus the counterintelligence investigation, it all kind of sounds the same, but it's actually quite different in some very important ways. A criminal investigation is really looking for a crime that has been committed. It is backward looking. It is always focused at something that has already occurred. What is really critically important about a counterintelligence investigation is that it is broader in that it looks at the potential for a crime that hasn't yet been committed, for activity that poses a threat from a foreign government or foreign government actors. And it's not centered on a specific moment in time when something criminal may or may not have occurred. And so, I think there are a lot of things that I think all of us have learned in the past 4 years that may be legal and that we think shouldn't be. But in the case of a counterintelligence investigation, they would be looking at how to identify and mitigate threats posed by a foreign government really broadly, which would have meant examining Trump's financials, looking at the totality of the circumstances to try to get a sense of whether the president or any of his associates may have been acting at the behest of or at risk of being utilized by a foreign actor for purposes that are counter to U.S. interests. And the thing, by choosing to shut that part of the investigation down, what Rosenstein did was really disturbing in two ways. One is that it dramatically limited the focus of what Mueller was allowed to look into. And second, he did so in secret. And that's the thing that's really odd, because when you look at the public letter that he put forward outlining what Mueller was going to be looking into, it read as though it was also a counterintelligence investigation. And certainly there was a lot of reporting around that time. Everybody believed that there was both the criminal investigation and the counterterrorism. But at some point, Rosenstein shut the counterintelligence side down, but he did so in secret and didn't inform the FBI of it. That to me is very unusual, and that's something that I think a lot of reporters are going to be digging into more in the coming days and weeks, and they should, because I have a lot of questions about why we wouldn't have looked into that, and it frankly means that the story is not finished.
Well, Katrina Mulligan, I thank you very much for joining us here today.
Great to be here.
Thank you. And again, I've been speaking with Katrina Mulligan, who's the Managing Director for National Security and International Policy at the Center for American Progress. She previously served as an attorney advisor and Director for Preparedness and Response in the National Security Division of the United States Department of Justice, where she also represented the department in a wide range of National Security Council policy committees. And she also served before then on the National Security Council staff and in several roles within the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, including as Associate Director for Strategic Communications Initiatives. We're going to take a brief station break and back looking into whether Biden's remarks today will alert the American people to how Trump is deliberately inflaming civil unrest to scare suburban whites concerned about public safety into voting for him.